Hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining me today. In this tutorial, I will be teaching you how to draw this pattern and paint into it using watercolors. Let me show you the materials that you'll be needing for the purpose of this tutorial. So I used a pencil, a ruler, some tracing paper. Mine is by Crayola, some graphite paper, a paintbrush, some watercolors. My paints are by Winsor & Newton, but you can use any watercolor brand that you like. And of course, last but not the least, some watercolor paper. Now let's see how we'll have our watercolors ready for use. So we dip our paint into some clean water. Then we go on to our pan. We grab some paint, like so, and then onto our palette. So you can use this paint as is. You can add more water to it to lighten up the paint, or you can add more paint to this to add more color and more concentration into the paint. Now I will show you how I drew the pattern. This is a rough sketch only. So first of all, we'll start off with a square and then a rhombus on top of it. And then we will use right where both the shapes are intersecting, we will draw straight lines joining the top points to the bottom ones, the right to the left, and all the diagonal ones as well. Now it can be tricky to have the two shapes in equal size. So one way to do that is to draw the square first, like so, and then we'll find the midpoint on all the sides and join straight and make straight lines, a vertical and a horizontal one that is running right across the shape. Now using a ruler, we will put it on the vertical and the horizontal line, and with the exact same measurements as we used for the square, we will draw a rhombus. And we will repeat the steps. So this is just a rough sketch, and you can use any rough sheet of paper for the initial drawing. We will use a tracing paper to transfer this drawing onto the watercolor paper. We won't directly draw on a watercolor paper because it has a texture, and if we make any mistakes and we'll use a lot of eraser, it is likely that we will ruin the texture of the paper. So following the exact same steps as I did for my rough drawing, I'm making this one just using a scale over here so that all my sides are equal and I have the pattern that I need. So I'll put the tracing paper on top and I'll join both the sheets using a tape just so that my paper doesn't move away. And then we can using it. I am using a graphite paper to transfer the drawing onto my watercolor paper, but you can use any technique that you like to transfer this drawing onto the final watercolor paper. Our final drawing is ready, and on our watercolor paper we'll correct any mistakes that we have, and we will start off with the first technique of watercolors, which is the wet on wet technique. Now using clean water on our brush, just like I showed in the first clip, we'll dampen the surface. Once it's still wet, we will paint into it using wet paint. We'll take paint on our palette from the tube or pan and add water into it. We'll start painting, moving the brush in the same direction from side to side for an even layer of paint. Now, one thing to note is that watercolors lighten when they dry. So after we are done painting this, we will let this dry and come back to it later to achieve the vibrancy in paint that we are looking for. For the outer shapes, we'll use the dry on wet technique. With this technique, we can achieve vibrant results faster, and it is best for shapes that are smaller, because it gives us more control. But one thing to note in this technique is that we have to work faster and we have to use our brush to push the paint from side to side. Whereas with the wet on wet technique, the damp surface of the paper allows for an easier flow of paint. Now, once the initial layer of paint is dry, we will go over it with more paint, exactly how I showed you before, and we will add more paint onto this layer. We can do as many layers as we like until we get the results that we are looking for, but make sure that you let the paint dry between each layer. Make sure that you push the paint right to the edge of the shape, just so that you don't leave any hard lines, because if you leave it there, it will leave a very like a hard line and a textured surface. So if that's the result that you're looking for, go ahead. But if you want a smoother look, a smoother texture to your watercolor, then you make sure that you uh, evenly distribute the paint into the shape. So I'll wait for all this paint to dry up, and then I'll go over again following the same technique, because I'm not happy with how with the concentration yet. I want it to look more vibrant and brighter, so I will go over with some more paint. I use a total of 3 layers of paint for these paintings. Make sure you wait between all these layers. You wait for the paint to dry, because if you keep adding paint to wet surface, it can our paint can appear a little muddy. This is how it looks now. I also use some gold acrylic paint to outline the edges of my star. And initially I thought I will let the star be white, but I thought I want to add some more paint into it, so I added this yellow, and now our painting is ready. Please let me know if this tutorial was easy to follow for you. If there's anything that was not clear, let me know, and I will make sure I'll make more tutorials so that watercolors is easy for you and you can have fun and learn more. Thank you for watching.